Hey guys, Kevin and Fred from kevinandfred.com again. Back.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Imagine that.
It's good to see
Original.
you.
You haven't been on the show in like a month.
Well, I got to stand behind the camera in Gary Keller's office.
You did a good job. You held it really still.
Nobody heard me,
That's
so
right.
I did a good job.
You did a great job. So hey, we had Gary Keller on the last few weeks, as you know, really talking about where the focusing question came from, and really where the inspiration for this book came from. Which, if you haven't seen those videos, go back and watch them. Gary really dropped some knowledge on you guys. But what we want to do is let's talk about that chapter all at once now, and let's really break that down.
Yeah, well, what we've done over the last month or two now, probably 2+, is go through this book, The One Thing by Gary Keller and Jay Papasan. And what Gary's done throughout the book is build up all these things to just crush all the lies that are out there, right?
Yeah.
This whole idea that everything matters equally, and that, willpower is always on will call, and discipline, all these things, we're breaking it down. And it's really leading up to this one chapter to say, okay, great, if we can get you over those mindset hurdles, now it's about the focusing question. And the focusing question is just this: what's the one thing I could do such that by doing it, it would make everything else easier or unnecessary? And it's actually a very simple question, but when you break it down and you really think about it, there's a lot of depth to the question. What's the one thing I can do? That's really part one of the question, and it sets the stage for taking action, right? It sets the stage to say there's only going to be one freaking thing. Multitasking's a lie. We just covered that in part one of the book. That's a lie. So it's only going to be one thing. You better make the one thing good.
Yeah, and the good thing is, I like that he says, what's the one thing I can do? Meaning there's action implied in that, meaning I can do it.
Yep, it's not could do or should do or would do, right? And he actually says in the book, he says it's an embedded command, right? What's the one thing I can do? It's an embedded command. You're literally helping yourself embed that command to tell yourself you're going to take action on this, right? And then part two of that is such that by doing it, it's kind of the bridge, if you will. It's the bridge between part one of the question and part three of the question, and it's literally saying that, I'm gonna do this thing such that by doing it. So it's kind of that bridge that ties together part one and three. And then the third part makes everything else easier or unnecessary, right? Well, and the key there, and you and Gary actually talked about it, is that's the levered activity, right? It's the thing that you have to sit back and think, what's the one thing I can do to make everything else easier or unnecessary? What's the one thing if I did that? It's literally the height of all leverage. It's the levered thing that makes everything else either go away or become less important.
Yeah, it's the most levered action you could possibly have, meaning greatest result or output for your effort.
Correct. And what's funny is in the book he talks a lot about how as kids growing up, this is in part one when he's going through the 6 lies, but he talks about as children growing up, we're taught, when to wake up every day, when to have breakfast, when to brush our teeth, when to go to school, when to come home, when to do your homework, when to go out and play, when to come back in for dinner, when it's time to go to bed, etc., etc. So literally our dominoes for us as kids, from a very young age all the way till we leave our parents' house are really lined up for us. But then what happens is we get out there in the real world and all of a sudden we go, well, I have all these things I want to do, but no one's there to line the dominoes up. And that's what this question's all about, and that's what that makes everything else easier and necessary. If you find the one thing, then it becomes your first domino, and it makes the rest of the dominoes easier for you, Yeah. And that's kind of the connecting part for me when I read that, as I go, okay, great, so I'm not a kid anymore, nobody's telling me how to live my life, but if I can answer this question and dig deep, then I'm setting myself up to plant that first domino that's going to lever everything else and make all the rest of them come down easier.
Yeah, you do act like a kid still sometimes.
Well, I absolutely do.
I want to point that out.
But a discipline life's a lie. So you might as well just be, have selected disciplines and be a kid the rest of the time.
Good point.
The more I know this book, the more I can use it to literally support everything I do in life.
Yeah.
It's a good excuse too. All right, come back next week. We're going to talk more from the book.
See you next week.